Good afternoon and welcome to a Tuesday edition of the PHLY Eagles Show, brought to you by TruMark Financial Credit Union. I'm Zach Berman, that's Fran Duffy, and we are 2 weeks out from training camp. So I can't use the trash line anymore. I'll just ask you, Fran. This is offensive line day. How excited are you to hear the cracks of the pads when you get out there?
Very excited. Obviously, look, we won't get a great sense of it until we get into, day 5, day 6. Once we see the pads officially get on, and then we get the real crack of the pads, even if it's not live action, you still get to see those guys start the one-on-one drills and things like that. Obviously, there'll be plenty of depth chart minutia for us to comb through as camp gets underway, which we'll talk about here in this episode. But definitely a lot to chew on, certainly, as we talk about this group going into 2025.
Minutia or minutiae, depending upon who you ask. Yeah, I can give you the whole preamble, but today is the football guys episode, right? Today is, look, we talked quarterbacks yesterday. That's the first take day, right? This is this is your NFL matchup day here, because we are talking offensive line. We are talking when I'm over there watching 7-on-7s and keeping the passing stats and seeing the skill players. Fran Duffy and Bo Wolf are on the other side watching one-on-ones. They're seeing Jeff Stoutland get on these offensive linemen. They're seeing snap by snap how that right guard competition is going, which is the perfect way to start this, right? You have to get to the big story at the top. And really, even with an offensive line that has Pro Bowlers at left tackle and right tackle, left guard and center, or Pro Bowl caliber players, I should say. All eyes this summer will be on right guard.
Yep.
That's the question. Last year, there was obviously Mekhi Becton. He wins that competition. He leaves. The year before that, right, was Cam Jurgens. The year before that was Isaac Seumalo. So the Eagles could be on to their fourth starting offensive line in 4 years, fourth starting right guard in 4 years. And it would seem going into camp that the front runner for that job is Tyler Steen. From your perspective, is this Tyler Steen's job to lose?
I think as we sit here, based off what we saw in the spring, or what you saw in the spring, I was not there, but what you saw in the spring, I think we have to say that he is probably in the pole position, right? But I think when we're looking at Tyler Steen, what's fascinating to me, the parallels, the dynamic that I have drawn, the comparison I've made over the last couple of years is people have started to kind of give up on Tyler Steen and say like, oh, he's maybe the staff doesn't like him. And so look, this is very similar to the arc that we saw from Isaac Seumalo, a player that you just mentioned that held down that job for a couple of years. That he was a rookie in 2016 and was a rookie backup, and then we saw in 2017 he began the year as the starter, and then had that rough outing on the road against Kansas City in week 2, week 3. Got benched, and that's when we saw, Wisniewski come in, and we saw, that he became more of the starter by that point. Certainly was the starter by the time we got to the Super Bowl. Seumalo wasn't really the full-time starter until you got to year 3. So now we're here at this point for Tyler Steen, and now at that time, is he going to fully take the reins of that job, and look, this would be a fine outcome as well. Is he more of just like a really good sixth man, and where he can be that swing back up at left tackle, left guard, right guard? That is a fine outcome for Tyler Steen as a draft pick as well, where he got taken. But ideally, you'd like him to be an every down player.
Yeah, well said. So the background for Tyler Steen, look, if you're watching the show on July 8th, we know you're a diehard. Literally a diehard, probably on allphly.com, or hopefully I should say, but also a diehard Eagles fan. But just to kind of set the scene here, Tyler Steen was the 65th overall pick in the 2023 draft, so high third round, and that was a year when there were some picks docked, so very close to a second round pick, right? You would imagine the Eagles had a second round grade on him or thereabouts if they're taking him 65 overall. He was a left tackle at Alabama. So he was not considered a guard in college. Moves over. You were down there in Mobile at the Senior Bowl when he kind of gets that first look at guard. The Eagles bring him in and try him out at guard as a rookie. Like you said, doesn't really take. He started 3 games here over the past 2 seasons. He's somebody who certainly from a size perspective has what, what Jeff Stoutland likes in a guard. He's 6'6", 321, has those the arm length nearly 33 inches. So not like a really long arms for a tackle, but acceptable inside certainly. And he's someone that has worked on his body since he's been here. He's learned the position. You mentioned Isaac Sayamalu. That's such a good example because he struggled finding a spot earlier on before he kind of settled into it in his career. Now, the big difference between this year and last year is that Mekhi Becton's presence loomed going into camp last year. For the audience, if you recall, Mekhi Becton signed after the draft as a swing tackle, and the Eagles tried him out at guard. And when he played guard in camp, it kind of I guess that in minicamp I should say that idea went into the head of the coaching staff of the front office. Tyler Steen gets banged up early in camp. Mekhi Becton goes in and never cedes that job. This year, I don't know if there's that Mekhi Becton waiting to take the job unless you think it's Kenyon Green. So from your perspective, if Tyler Steen doesn't win the job, is it Kenyon Green? Is it Matt Pryor? Is there door number 3 that I'm not thinking about? What's your view on this competition?
Yeah, my gut would tell me, and this is just me, my gut would tell me that it would be Kenyon Green would be the person that would start if Tyler Steen does not win that job, right? I think that Pryor, he's a known quantity in the building. The coaching staff, scouting staff, obviously very well aware of what he can be. Former Eagles draft pick, was here for a handful of years. What I described with Steen, where, all right, you're a backup tackle, backup guard on both sides. He has proven that throughout his career. That was a great draft pick, a 6th-round pick. Fifth or 6th round pick coming out of TCU a handful of years ago. He has had a really good career for that draft slot. And I think when you're looking at Pryor, to me, he makes the team if Steen is the starter, right? To me, because now he fills in, he's able to fill in that role. You lose Fred Johnson, Jack Driscoll, some of these other names there that were those flex backups. That's something, a role that Pryor can come in and play right now. I think when you're looking at Kenyon Green, he also is a player. I mean, he started, I believe, all 4 of those 5 spots along the offensive line during his career at Texas A&M. Now, he's only been a left guard over the course of his NFL career, but this is a guy that can come in and he's got that proven versatility going back to his days in college. Now, as we mentioned, you pointed out that he was working mostly, I mean, he was with the 3rd team for the spring, right? I mean, he was working with the 2nd and 3rd team throughout the majority of OTAs and minicamp. And so I think when you're looking at Kenyon Green, really when you get into the summer, because there are reasons why I think that was probably the case. This is a guy that's working with the group for the first time on the field. You want your timing and your rhythm to be good. You don't want guys to be off kilter there. So as he was getting adjusted, it makes sense that he was back there. Now I'm interested, once we get into the summer, once we get into like day 2, day 3 of camp, is he going to be with that 2nd team, or is he going to if he's still relegated to the 3rd team by the time we get into 3 weeks from now? I think it's pretty telling, and it's probably more than likely that he wouldn't be on the roster by the time we got to opening day.
Wouldn't be on the roster. Okay, so that's certainly something we need to watch here. I mean, the Eagles did backfill that, like you said. Having Pryor gives you someone with starting experience, but when they acquired Kenyon Green, my thinking was he's gonna be the starting guard, right?
Yeah.
Because my logic was as you outlined at the top. Steen had a chance 2 years ago. They gave the job to Cam Jurgens. He had the chance last year. They gave the job to Mekhi Becton. I understand, as we discussed, that sometimes guys are slow developing and that it takes time. But I also think, too, that there's another you know it or you don't component to it, right? Like you're going to propose or you're not. And there's as I look at this situation here, I thought Kenyon Green coming back in that CJ Gardner-Johnson trade made sense. But your point about the left guard of it all is applicable. The fact that we didn't see him on the right side this year. By the way, Bo, you're listening, you're watching right now. You were right. I was wrong. I own up to that. The fact that we didn't see him on the right side speaks volumes. Now, there's a difference between minicamp and training camp. Yes. I get that. But how deep, and it's like, when you get to that 2nd week of training camp, Then you're starting to get into preseason mode.
Yep.
Then you're starting to get into open, joint practice mode. If Kenyon Green is not getting work with the first team in those first 8-10 practices, then he's not going to be a starting guard for this team at least going into the year. So that's really the reason that I started with right guard here. Is I think that's the most fascinating thing to watch on the offensive line.
Yeah, and I also want to just kind of follow up too. I think when you're looking at, Kenyon Green and my thoughts on Green at this stage of the calendar compared to where I was on Becton at this stage of the calendar a year ago, I'm actually a little bit more excited about what we've seen, the flashes we've seen from Kenyon Green here in the NFL versus what we saw from Becton. I mean, obviously, look, we know Becton turned into a Pro Bowl quality player here in Philadelphia last year on their Super Bowl run. But I think that some of the things we saw from him with the Jets, the lows were lower in my opinion than some of the lows we saw from Kenyon Green last year in Houston. So I would say after going back and watching some of the film of Kenyon Green, like I'm excited about what he could be here in this offense. I think it could be a really fun competition with he and Tyler Steen this summer, but you gotta also just let it play out. And like I mentioned, if he's not working with the ones by the time we get into week 2, he's not in the starter. If he's not working with the twos by the time we get to that point, that's when I think his roster spot would probably be in jeopardy.
So Kenyon Green, 6'4", 323 pounds, but 34-inch arms, 34 and 1/8 inch arms. So longer arms than Steen. Different body type, of course, than Becton last year.
Right.
Then even Tyler Steen this year. Certainly different body type than Cam Jurgens. I always like to point out the contract situations. It's probably advantageous for the Eagles for Steen to win the job because Steen's under contract this year and next year. Kenyon Green's entering the last year of his deal. You saw this with Mekhi Becton. If Kenyon Green starts and he plays well, he's getting paid somewhere else. The Eagles are not going to pay 5 offensive linemen $10+ million. But also, if Kenyon Green's a $10+ million player, it means this worked out really well for the Eagles. So I suppose you can see it from both sides, but only 24 years old, right? So there's a lot of upside here. If there's anyone who you think can extract that value, it's Jeff Stoutland. The pre-draft interest was clear with the Eagles. That it's not something that they've hid from. It's why they targeted him in the deal. So I'm fascinated to see you. You mentioned Matt Pryor. Is there anyone else here like Trevor Keegan? Is he someone who could get into the mix? I don't think Drew Kendall. When we talk about centers later on, we'll talk about Drew Kendall. But really, is this either Green or Pryor, or is Keegan even someone worth talking about this high in the show?
Yeah, my instinct tells me that Keegan would not be a factor here for the starting job. I would say he would be like the very, very dark horse candidate.
Yeah.
So I would definitely put him 4th in the pecking order there.
And then the other thing that is important to point out is, and this is why these first 2 weeks are fascinating, because if you don't go with Steen as your starting guard, what you need to do is you need to start preparing Steen to be your 6th offensive lineman, to be your swing tackle, right? And that's an important job, especially when you have Lane Johnson, especially when you have Jordan Mailata. So, you both these guys have missed time in the past few years. I would imagine if Steen's not starting, he's the top backup at tackle. So we talked about those first 2 weeks based on your experience observing practice, based on knowing the way football training camp works. Jeff Stoutland, what's kind of the timeline here for when they're going to want to have that 5 established and when you need to know who that swing tackle is going to be going into week 1 against Dallas?
Yeah, I think the other part of that equation that we know is going to be the case is we know how secretive Nick Sirianni is, right? And
yes.
We know that as much as he will be pressed on that decision, he will not. Hey, I've got no reason to tell you guys that we don't play a game until X number of weeks from now. So I don't think we're going to get a real feel of it. But I mean, it was 2.5 weeks into camp last year, maybe like post preseason game 1, before preseason game 2, when we all kind of had the feeling, okay, Mekhi Becton is the starting right guard here, in terms of just the what we saw the snap share being. So my guess is they like to have that kind of carved out. Now, we also have seen instances here with this organization where that kind of training camp battle at that position bleeds into the regular season. We all remember the guard rotation, with that we've seen in the past. So I think that ideally you'd like to have that ironed out by the time you get into the dog days of summer and the dog days of camp. But I think at the end of the day, if Kenyon Green and Tyler Steen are really battling out, and it really looks like it's going to be like that two-man race there, they're going to let that play out, and they're going to give both those guys enough rope to go and win the job.
And then my last question here before we transition to the high-profile tackles is what's going to decide who wins this job? Because the simple answer is the best man wins. But there's so many ways to determine who the best player is. Is it how they look in camp? Is it what the upside is? Is it the connection? Is it the comfort level that Lane Johnson and Cam Jurgens has with that right guard? Like, when Jeff Stoutland's looking at this, is it the high watermark that he's paying attention to? As Bo jokes that I'd like to talk about, is it the typical performance, or is it like, the special performance? Like, what's going to be the determining factor for who wins right guard?
The way that I view the offensive line, and honestly, especially with this scenario, when you have Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, 4 Pro Bowl and all-pro quality players, you don't want a guy that's high variance, right? Like you don't want the guy that, like the highs are high, but the lows are low. And this guy is, he's the guy that everyone is trying to attack on a weekly basis. You'd rather have a steady Eddie as that fifth wheel there, for that spot. So that's my personal opinion. I do think that overall, when you're looking at offensive line and the way they look at it, is like, you want a guy that can be reliable. When you've got, that person's responsible for protecting Jalen Hurts. That person's responsible for blocking for Saquon Barkley. I think that at the end of the day, they want someone that they can rely on in that spot, and someone that they can count on to be that type of presence on a week-to-week basis.
Make sure you stay tuned after this break to find out what we're looking for from perhaps the best tackle combination in the NFL, Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. It's time to talk about Bet365, and I've talked about Bet365 for months here, and it's because it's the place to go when you're watching a game and want to place a bet. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. They have 90 million users worldwide. They live stream 780,000 events each year. They offer the widest range of games and markets available for live in-game betting across 78 sports. So look, if I have baseball on the TV here, and I want to place a bet on what that next at bat's going to be or who's going to win the game, the place where I'm going is Bet365. Breaking news from Bet365: new customers now get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5, win or lose. Sign up, use the code PHLY365, deposit $10 and place a bet for $5. They get $150 in bonus bet if your bet wins or loses. Bonus bets can be used on the spread, totals, players, props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and over and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
And we'll now talk about our friends over with GameTime, because look, it's that point in the summer where that's all right. As we mentioned, I mean, we're 2 weeks away from Eagles training camp, which means my free time is about to be diminished in a big way. So if I want to go over to Citizens Bank Park, I want to catch a Phillies game, and it's like, you know what? It's gonna be a nice night tonight. We got no storms coming. That's unfortunately not the case here tonight. But you know what? It's gonna be a nice night. Let's head down to the ballpark. Let's go watch the Phillies play. Well, you head over to GameTime, and on short notice, I can find the easiest way to get tickets at the best price, and also there are all these features inside GameTime they're able to utilize. It's not just about being able to find tickets last minute and knowing you're going to get the best price possible. But also, you can check the view from your seats in the venue, any venue you're going to. You mentioned you were going down to Washington. You were going to take Reed down to go see them play. The Phillies play at the Nationals Park. You can go. If you're not familiar with the arena or with the park that you're going to, Well, now also you're able to log into the app. You can see what your view looks like from the seats. Bam, and you're good to go, and you feel confident going in. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code PHLY for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Fran, are you a TSA pre guy?
No, I am not.
Okay.
I always I'm right on the cusp of you know what, I might take enough
Yeah.
flights this year. Obviously, I'm not flying as often as you are,
Yeah.
so I have not felt the need to take the plunge there. I probably should have by this point, though.
Well, good news for those who are not TSA pre people, because I literally just saw this headline pop up in my
Yeah.
screen. I got a news alert. Travelers no longer have to remove their shoes to get through the regular line at TSA
Yeah.
security checkpoints at airports. So, look, I am a devotee of, or devo, is it devotee or devotee?
I think it's
believe
devotee.
devotee. Is it?
I think it's Tay.
It's Tay? Okay.
I
I'm
think
devoted.
so.
I'm devoted to TSA pre. I was an early adopter. Surprise, surprise. And I enjoy it. I was about to say I love it. I'm not gonna throw the L word that strongly. But I use it frequently, like you say. You know, I travel about 15 trips a year. And then but really the advantages are the you don't have to take off your shoes, you don't have to take your laptop out. If you don't have to take off if you don't have to take off your shoes in the regular line, I imagine that accelerates even more. And people will wonder, is there as pronounced a difference between TSA pre and the TSA regular? So curious to see. This is something that we need to check back to see if it's worth it.
What would the pre-check need to do to level the playing field, to further enhance and to keep you on board? What could they do to seduce you into making sure that you stay a loyal customer?
Honestly, to me, it's the efficiency of it, right? Is that so you keep that line moving. You can get through in under 5 minutes. I'm good, and you don't have to take out the laptop, so that's a big benefit. I'm trying to think what would be. I guess the next advantage would be the facial recognition, to the point that you don't even have to stop to show because have you ever gone to one of these Amazon grocery stores? Have you seen
No,
these,
I
or have you
have
heard about
not.
these?
They put one in our neighborhood, and I have not been yet. I've heard.
I mean, it is amazing. You walk in, okay, you take your thing off the shelf, and you leave, and then it just charges your card. It is fascinating to me, the technology involved. But the reality is this: the wait at the security line, like for them to actually see your ID, that really doesn't take that much time. So if it's not cutting the time, I certainly don't want anyone to lose their job. So I'm good with the TSA official being there. So we don't need to. But you're asking what would enhance the TSA pre experience. Honestly, it's good as it is. It's not something that needs to be messed with. Let's just keep it moving, keep it fast, and I'm good with that.
So I would be remiss if I did not say that the picture taking is optional for people. You can say no. You can opt out of doing the picture taking, because I can see how that would be alarming to a lot of people. I would say that gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit as well. So yeah, I know that there are a lot of people out there that don't love that. I will say though, I am a little shocked that this was the headline that you chose to go with, coming
as opposed to Waymo. Right?
As opposed to Waymo, the fact that you did not lead the show, that this wasn't in the headline, that wasn't in the graphic for YouTube. I mean, shocked that was not the way you went.
Well, first off, I'm glad you brought this up. I was going to save that for the second break, but happy to address it now. Amazing move here in Philadelphia. Hope everyone gets a. I didn't want to lead with it or put look. Waymo, you're more than welcome to advertise here with PHLY. We have a devoted audience, but Waymo is terrific. It's efficient. It was relatively affordable when I used it in Arizona. Look, there's a process here where they need to get more comfortable with the roads in Philly. But yeah, but look, it's if you look at the statistics that suggest, their safety numbers. If you look at the efficiency with which they get from point A to point B, I am quite intrigued, and I think, look, I would tell the people in the chat who are skeptical of this, embrace technology. Don't run from it. Embrace technology, right? So find out how look, if we did this show 15 years ago, there wouldn't even have been such a thing. Like there weren't podcasts on YouTube 20 years ago, number one. So a technological improvement there. Second, the idea that you can just pick up your phone, show where you are, and a car pulls up in front of you, that's incredible technology. So let's I'm not going to back away from this. I acknowledge there are some technological improvements that have, there's residual effects that are negative. I am happy with what I experienced with Waymo so far.
There's for the to not risk going completely down this path. Did you see the video that was going viral yesterday of the robot that was like just getting like beat to hell by the guy, and it was like, oh, look how determined this robot is and how all the damage it can take and still go. I just felt for this guy, just knowing what's coming down the pipe in 3 or 4 years when T2 Judgment Day happens.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that there's gonna be some impatient Philadelphia drivers who stick up the middle finger at the driverless car. We'll see. It'll give us something fun to talk about.
Yes.
But you know what else is fun to talk about? The starting offensive tackles. And it's funny. We've been talking about how things constantly change. This is my 13th consecutive year talking about Lane Johnson as the starting right tackle. Lane Johnson is the right tackle. If I'm fortunate enough to be on this beat for, let's see, so this is Jordan Mailata's 7th year. So I have that wrong? Yeah. So
yeah, that's right.
if I'm fortunate enough to be on this beat for another, 6-7 years, I'll be talking about Jordan Mailata when he gets to that point. The Eagles are set at offensive tackle. Is there anything, like, when you're watching this in one-on-ones, when you're watching this in practice, is it just admiration for how good this player is? Is there anything you want to see, or is it, let's just get to September 4th with both these guys?
It definitely is more the latter, but you always want to kind of sit back and kind of appreciate that. It's fun. I was listening to Chris Long and his podcast. I want to say it was the 4th of July. It was one of his episodes last week, and he was talking about going up in training camp against a player like Lane. He was like, it's useless for me because he just beats me on every rep and I can't work on anything. And when we talked about that, I know with Hassan Reddick, his first summer here in Philadelphia, where Reddick didn't look great, and it was like, yeah, but you kind of forget he's going up against Lane Johnson every day, right? And so and then he goes off and has that hugely productive 2022 season. So I think you want to make sure you don't take Lane Johnson for granted, but obviously. Look, you want to also make sure you get him to September, get him to week 1 as best you can as well.
Yeah. Now we should also add, this was kind of the rationalization for Bryce Huff last summer rather. It's like, oh, he's going up against Lane Johnson, right? But yeah, Lane Johnson can make Pro Bowls look like mere mortals. In Jordan Mailata's case, he's still on that development curve, right? He's still like,
which is crazy.
I don't think we've seen the best of Jordan Mailata yet. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair. I think that when you look at him, especially in the pass game, that there are still areas that he can continue to improve. And he's just improved by leaps and bounds over the course of his career. But also, this is another good example. Now, he's a unicorn from a story standpoint, from not just a physical talent standpoint, but just where he came from, how far he's come along. But in year 2 training camp, I remember listening to you guys, and it was like a conversation like, yeah, I think Jordan Mailata probably should make the 53. Really, and again, just kind of going back to the Tyler Steen side of it, just because the first 2 years didn't go well, hey, Nolan Smith is playing, late into the preseason and preseason game 3, he's a bust, move on. You got to give these time. Some of these guys need a lot of time to develop. And I think when you're looking at Jordan Mailata, he's a great example of that. And as you mentioned, I do think that his best football may still be ahead of him.
And so I could filibuster here and talk about Mailata and Lane Johnson, but the reality is, when we do these training camp observations, Jordan Mailata is really good. Lane Johnson's really good. Like it doesn't take an astute observer of practice like you and Bo to tell me that. But where I imagine where you and Bo and me, we'll be watching during these practices is what's going on behind them, because
Yep.
there's the kind of the steady veteran backup in Kendall Lamb, who we can discuss. But I think where most of the intrigue will be these day 3 draft picks. Will be how does Miles Hinton look? How does Cameron Williams look? When I was doing that show last week with Rich, when I was assessing my 25-step guide to Howie Roseman's offseason, and I said take an offensive tackle on day 2, and one of the names I put there was Cameron Williams. So the fact that they were able to get Cameron Williams when they did says something. Miles Hinton is, just from asking around, is someone that I think they're higher on than consensus, which is typically the case when you take somebody. But that's a player that I think that I think they believe has upside. So, what will you be watching from both Williams and Hinton this summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think with both players, I'm really not anticipating them to have a huge impact on 2025, honestly. Yeah, I think that it would be, that's a cherry on top if either of them is able to be counted on to be the third tackle in year one, because you are talking about 2 late round draft picks, right? Guys with ability, guys with tools, but refinement needed. Yesterday afternoon, I was watching Clemson defensive lineman Peter Woods, who was a sophomore last year, rising junior. He's going to be a top 10 pick whenever he comes out. Just an outstanding player. He gave it to Cameron Williams in that playoff game back in January. Now he's going to be an elite player, but I think when you're looking at, and that he was still a sophomore, right? And so I think when you're looking at Cameron Williams, like he still has a ways to go. And I think when you're looking at what the anticipation or what the expectations rather should be for him, I think coming in looking competent, good flashes. Hopefully you have some days where it's like, oh, that was a really good day. He's going to have some bad reps. There are going to be some reps against, Jalix Hunt. There are going to be some reps against Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari and guys that have been around the league for a while, that are going to come in and they're going to make, Patrick Johnson is going to give Cameron Williams fits, right? Just because Patrick Johnson's been in the league for 4 years, 5 years. So I think when you're looking at those guys, Hinton and Williams, it's, can you show flashes? Do you look like you belong? How do you rebound when the adversity strikes in practice? Can you rebound from a bad day in the office and come back the next day and look good? Those are the things I'll be looking at when it comes to those 2 young players.
And yeah, I agree with you. These aren't players that you're looking at as part of the rotation this year. But look, when Bo's crowning himself king of the beats, a big part of this is going to be like, how do you figure out those backup offensive line spots?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about players in the 6th round, they're not guaranteed spots in the 53.
No.
Right. And so it's always exciting to talk about it around draft time and post draft. And we get Fran's outstanding scouting reports, but these are players who could well be on practice squad. These are players who well could be on someone else's roster. So the Eagles will really try to see what they have in both these guys, and I wouldn't be surprised too if Cameron Williams gets some time inside at guard. So that's something that I'm certainly watching.
To me, like, I would give Darian Kennard better odds to be like active / on the 53 than Williams and Hinton at this point, right? Like I don't know, just based on, because I haven't seen any of these guys live. You did get a chance to see them in the spring. I'm excited to see what they look like this summer, and maybe they're able to swing it the other way.
This is why this is a good show. You literally took the word guy I wanted to discuss here was Darian Kennard, and the transition was someone who's played guard and tackle in the past, but who the Eagles really identified as the tackle last year, who earned a spot on the 53-man roster based on the way he played in training camp, in the preseason. Like, this is not to kind of get on a pedestal here, but you say, what's the value of like the practice reports? What's the value of watching those preseason games? Well, this tackle show last year, we probably weren't talking about Darian Kennard being on the 53. Darian Kennard played his way onto the 53 last summer. I recall Lane Johnson talking about the way Kennard really stood out. He was active for only 2 games. He played 3 snaps against the Bengals. He started against the Giants week 18. He's also somebody who has literally won a Super Bowl every year he's been in the NFL. So, he has that winner's trait. But Kennard's the player who like, all right, last year was the year when he made the team. This is the year when he's trying to be active on game day. I think that's probably the hope. Obviously, he wants to make the roster, but like, what's realistically the next step for Kennard? It's being one of those 8 offensive linemen active on game day.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a goal that he can achieve, here this year, because I think to me, he is more in competition with Matt Pryor for snaps and role than he is with the 2 rookies. That's kind of how I'm viewing Kennard coming into this summer. So to me, I would expect it to play out that way. Is that if we're talking about pecking order, it's like you got the starters, then you have Lamb and Pryor and Kennard, and then it's the 2 rookies, and it's like, all right, who shakes out? Maybe 2 of the vets make it, and then one of the rookies make it, and maybe you include Holland Pierce in there as well with the rookie draft picks, and you say, all right, how many of these guys are able to make the 53? You'd love the young guys to be able to come in and shine, but odds are that you're not going to get that from both of those players. You might not get it from either.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Kendall Lamb. Kendall Lamb to me was one of the more curious signings this offseason. He was an outlier in age. He's an outlier in size on the Eagles' offensive line. He's not what you typically think of for the Eagles at offensive tackle, but he's somebody who, like, they clearly identified they want to bring in, and there's significant starting experience here, right? So Kendall Lamb, 32 years old. Okay, he's played in the league for 10 years. He has 44 starts. He's played, I believe, 973 snaps at left tackle, 1,611 snaps at right tackle. So he is your prototypical swing tackle if it's not Steen, or if somebody else kind of doesn't fill that role. I imagine that's precisely what they were looking for. Is that what the expectation is for Kendall Lamb? Is that if there's not a young player you're comfortable with as that swing tackle, you have someone who can do it?
Yeah, it just goes back to like the optionality. We talked about that yesterday at quarterback when they make the trade, when they trade Kenny Pickett away to Cleveland. All right, you get DTR back. Well, you do that because you're comfortable with the potential that, hey, he could be our QB3 going into the season. You don't know that you're going to get Kyle McCord in the draft. Well, McCord he becomes available at your slot in round 6. Like, all right, let's bring him in, and we'll let this battle play out. It's the same thing here along the offensive line, where they've got a bunch of potential outs for who could be their 6th, their 7th, their 8th, their 9th guy in the rotation, and backing up at several different spots. You've got a good mix of young rookies with upside, and then seasoned, reliable vets, like guys that you feel like can come in, and you're just kind of taking the best of either mix, and that's how you're going to construct your group here as you come out of August.
And then just to remind the audience, because look, if you haven't followed every single transaction for the Eagles this offseason, or if perhaps you kind of forget what that depth chart looked like last year, Fred Johnson was the swing tackle a year ago. Fred Johnson, yep. and so when I think of like what the Eagles typically have in that spot, I think of someone like Fred Johnson, someone in his mid-20s, who's has the size, is a project type player who develops, and then he goes on to find a better deal elsewhere, right? So that's similar. I don't want to say kind of like what Kennard is, but that's kind of like the profile that I typically think of for your swing guy, or someone who's kind of ascending into that starter role for you, like what Tyler Steen would be. So it's a different type of profile going with Kendall Lamb, and the fact that they signed him. You mentioned optionality. They consider that really important. And I said it earlier in the show. Lane Johnson's missed time. Jordan Mailata's missed time. Something I've said repeatedly on this show during the past 2 years, and then on our previous show, the previous 4 years, is that if you just look at the Howie Roseman era, the 2 years that have gone to crap, to use that term, is when the offensive line got decimated with injuries. And I know from conversations with Howie, I know from conversations with people in that building, that one thing that they are almost maniacal about is making sure they have depth on the offensive line. Because what you don't want is, like, if you're down to a backup tackle, it can sink your season if you don't feel he's a starting caliber player. So pay close attention to who that swing tackle is going to be. Make sure you listen in not just to find out what headline we might discuss next, but more because Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, 2 Pro Bowlers. We'll talk about them, and we'll talk about who is competing to get time behind them. So here on this July 8th show, let me talk about Monarch Money, because finances, they can be messy and confusing. We all need a good company like ALLCITY has a good CFO, but we all need a personal CFO, right? And that's what Monarch Money is. It gives you full visibility and control so you can stop earning and start growing. It's more than your average budgeting app. Monarch Money is a complete financial command center for your accounts, investments, and goals. Don't just manage your money, start building wealth with 50% off your first year for all of our listeners. You want to make sure that you protect those financial blind spots. It could be dining out. This time of year, I have more weekends free to go on dates, and I'm dining out maybe a little bit more. Today's a day when I've already seen in my email maybe a family member of mine is taking advantage of certain discounts at a certain online website today. So you gotta make sure that you're tracking where your money goes. That's where Monarch Money goes. That's where Monarch Money comes in handy. Start managing your finances to build a life you actually want. Monarch Money makes managing money simple, even for busy lives. It was named the Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. So you know it's legit. The top recommended personal finance app by users and experts with over 30,000 5-star reviews. By the way, we need to get this show to get 30,000 5-star reviews. Financial stress is one of the top reasons relationships fall apart. Trust me, I'm gonna say you don't want that to happen. Monarch makes money conversations easier. Get control of your overall finances with Monarch Money. Use code PHLY at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code PHLY.
That was good. So let's say you have your CFO and because you need to plan for this big project you've got at the house, and one of those biggest projects you can do is taking on new floors. And if you're going to take on new flooring, the best place that you need to go and make sure you talk to is Empire Today, because you know that you can go to any of the big box stores. We don't need to go into the names of those stores. You can go to one of those stores and you could find a flooring department, but guess what? To get there, you're going to have to go through the aisles. You're going to be carrying stuff home. You're going to talk to somebody that's not a flooring expert, someone that doesn't major in flooring every single day, because tomorrow they might be working over in gardening. Yesterday, they were doing sinks. Might have been doing light bulbs 2 or 3 days ago. So I think at the end of the day, you want to make sure you put your best foot forward. Talk to Empire Today, because this again, they major in flooring. They live and breathe flooring, and they will be with you every single step of the way. You don't want to go out in the summer heat and have to go and wander through those aisles. Let them come to you. They're going to bring the showroom right to your front door, where you can pick the right colors and style for your space. See how it looks with your furniture in your house. Get those precise measurements taken by a professional, and then have all your questions answered right there, so there's no surprises come installation. And by the way, when we're talking about installation, you get the clear upfront and inclusive pricing, and you can schedule that installation as soon as the next day, because again, time is of the essence. Nobody likes to wait. So schedule that free in-home estimate today, because some things are just better at home. PHLY listeners can receive a $350 discount when using the promo code PHLY. Yes, you heard that right. $350 discount with the code PHLY. Restrictions apply. Visit EmpireToday/PHLY for full details.
Have you thought any more about the clam chowder?
I'm going to be honest. Once I did think about
Okay.
it one. I did think about it one
Okay.
extra time last night. Yeah, it's. Well, am I going to say that I'm going to do it? Probably not. But it's. I don't. I will say that my Google searches yesterday kind of proved that you are not alone in doing this,
Okay.
and obviously you're not alone because you got it from somebody else. In the restaurant. So no, but more power to you.
Good. I always like when the conclusion is that I'm not as crazy as it might seem on the show from time to time.
You've done yourself no favors here multiple times this episode.
Yeah. So you know what? Sometimes I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a good transition. I don't have a good transition here. What I can tell you is that at guard and at center, the Eagles are in a good spot. Landon Dickerson,
Yeah.
left guard. Cam Jurgens, starting center. Is this a similar situation to what we talked about with the tackles, where there's nothing you really need to see from either of these guys in camp, or like, look, year 2 for Cam Jurgens starting at center, is there more you want to see from him? Is the recovery from the back injury something that you're kind of closely monitoring? What's the training camp gist for both those players?
Honestly, with both guys coming off their injuries from the end of 2024, you want to see both guys healthy. We know that Landon was dealing with stuff. We know that current Cam was dealing with the back, like you mentioned. So being able to see both guys healthy will be big. No reason to think otherwise as we sit here on July 8th. But, I think at the end of the day, we know what to expect from both those players, and that's why going into camp, all eyes are going to be on right guard for this reason, because you feel so good about the other 4 spots, and you don't even have to think about it. So I think when you're looking at Landon, you're looking at Cam, it's more about who's backing up at those spots. If worst case scenario happens, and you got to plug one of them in if they're on the sideline.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think the big story for those players is just the recovery from injury, right? I mean, Cam Jurgens, we didn't see him this summer. We saw we didn't see him this spring. We saw Landon Dickerson out there this spring. But you really want to kind of get a sense of where Cam Jurgens is, because look, I mean, he was pretty candid about the significance of that injury and like how that affected him. Of course, as he said, pain is temporary, and you're a champion forever here. But it is something that he's crouched down the snap every play, right? So you want to make sure that the back is in a good spot, and I think that's why the Eagles were careful for it. But these are both players too, where like similar to Mailata, they haven't reached their peak yet. It's fair to say, and the Eagles paid Cam Jurgens to be one of the best centers in the NFL. It's fair to say there's another step in Cam Jurgens' game. Like last year, this time, as Cam will remind you, the big question was, can he take over for Jason Kelce? That question doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, the question now is, can this guy be the best center in the NFL? Because Creed Humphrey is obviously up there, Tyler Linderbaum's up there, but Cam Jurgens is in that conversation, and that's only going to continue. And then in Landon Dickerson's case, you want him to just stay healthy out there, but the consistency with which he plays, like the size, the flexibility, he's a rare left guard for the Eagles.
Yeah, and it's a great place to be, and we've talked about it numerous times throughout the offseason, the state of this Eagles roster, and how 31 other franchises would love to have what Nick Sirianni has at his disposal and what the coaching staff has at his disposal. I would say the same thing about this offensive line. Basically every team, and you always feel it when you're going into free agency, when you're going into the draft, and you're looking at team needs. Every team would love to be able to add offensive linemen, and the Eagles do such a good job of always kind of filling up that pipeline, and adding young talent to, because again, looking at Cam at those 3 rookies that they brought in on day 3, all 3 of them are not going to hit. And I include throw in the 4th there with Holland Pierce as well.
Yes.
They're not all going to hit, but one of them hits, and now it's like, okay, now you've got another guy that we're talking about as an established backup and potential starting quality player a year from now. All right. And so they do such a good job of always adding to the trenches, and it allows them to be in this position year after year.
So we'll kind of close it out when we talk about the backup guards for Dickerson. But I think more interesting this summer is who the backup center is going to be. When I was out there in the spring, the player who was filling in for Cam Jurgens was Brett Toth. And Brett Toth, to put in perspective, came to the Eagles in 2019, right? So there's almost a career achievement to him being that next guy up this time of year. Brett Toth has stuck around. He's someone who's really respected in that building. He's like an extra coach for them. But Brett Toth is not a natural center, and I think he would admit as much. Drew Kendall, a player that the Eagles targeted in the draft, a player that the Eagles liked. Drew Kendall seems to be in a good position to be the backup center if he looks good this summer. What do you want to see from Drew Kendall out there?
I would say the most important thing for him, because we know that they drafted a center late in day 3 a year ago that some people in the media corps really liked and were really big fans of.
Yep.
And because he did not have that proven versatility to be able to play other spots along the offensive line, they viewed him as someone that they could, expose to the waiver wire, and they ended up losing him. And I think when you're looking at Drew Kendall, that same question is going to present itself. That does not mean that if he only plays center that they're going to waive him for final cuts or right afterwards and then they're going to lose him. But it does mean that you would love to be able to have a guy that has that proven versatility. Brett Toth does have that ability to, this is a guy who was a college tackle and has played some guard over the course of preseasons in years past. So I think when you're looking at Brett Toth, that he's a guy that can come in and fill a couple different spots. I think Kendall would have to be like head and shoulders ahead of, to me, I think he would have to be, because look, it's the same thing as the McCord thing from yesterday. I don't think Drew Kendall's like a lock to make it. I think that there's a chance that if Kendall or if Brett Toth is on equal playing field by the time we get to the end of August, and can fill in a number of different spots, they have done that in the past. Where they'll make that argument that he could be on the 53 over Kendall.
Yeah, so look, I never like when there's manufactured debate on shows. Like I like it to be real and authentic, and this can be real and authentic. I disagree with you. I think Drew Kendall's here to be the backup center. I think it'll be a disappointment if Brett Toth is the Eagles' backup center this year. Brett Toth has had ample time to win that job as backup center. Hasn't been the case. I think honestly, if they don't have confidence in Kendall, then you're probably looking at Landon Dickerson sliding over, and they're not carrying a second center on the roster this year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But look, and I don't want to just identify a player by their round. But Drew Kendall's a 5th round pick. I know the Eagles cut Clayton Thorson. At one point, they cut Nate Gary. It's atypical for the Eagles to cut a 5th round pick. I look at that a little different than I look at the tackles. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I'm putting too much stock into where they were drafted, but it would surprise me if Drew Kendall is not on the 53-man roster this year. Am I overstating this?
I don't think it's necessarily unfair to say, oh yeah, it would be a shock. Like I would expect him to be on the 53, but I don't think that. I just don't think it's a lock. Sure. I don't think that he's like cemented in. Oh yeah, center 2. Signed, sealed, delivered. I do think that he's going to have to compete for a spot.
Interesting. And so there's one other player that I want to mention here, and he's someone that we just discussed briefly on the show earlier today, and who we'll talk about in the guard competition, and that's Trevor Keegan. Because as Bo spotted first, Trevor Keegan was taking snaps this spring rather, and that should not be dismissed. Trevor Keegan was a 5th round pick last year. The Eagles kept him around. Like they could have kept Dylan McMahon, who had more of a potential role on the team last year. They clearly thought Trevor Keegan's upside was higher than Dylan McMahon's upside, which was why they kept Trevor Keegan around the entire season, even though there wasn't necessarily a need for him last year. Trevor Keegan, who has experience at guard, and we'll talk about him at guard, but if you think he can play center, it just changes the possibility. It changes the game day permutations. Should we be talking about Trevor Keegan in the center mix, or is this one of these things like we were there on a day in June when he was snapping? This isn't something that really factors into September, October, November.
I think that it's something that bears watching as we get into the summer. And if we start to see that, hey, you know what, in team drills, they're starting to work him in there. And certainly, obviously, preseason, if he's starting to work in there, then that's important. And then I think that he becomes, again, someone that would compete with Kendall. I think that would be the case, is if Trevor Keegan is going to be proven that he can play guard center, and then you look at Kendall and he doesn't have that same flexibility, that would be the death knell for his roster spot. And I think that's what it could, those kind of decisions. That's what happened, like you said, with McMahon last year.
Yeah. So then let's round out the guard spot here, because we kind of went around the line, not in the natural order, but we've really spoken about everybody who is a possibility here. Because if you're competing for the right guard, you're probably competing for left guard as well. So Kenyon Green factors in there. I mean, Matt Pryor, in theory, although he's probably more on the right side. Trevor Keegan was in the mix there. Brett Toth we know can play guard. He can play all 5 spots. But the one player that you mentioned and you lumped him in with the other tackles, that's Holland Pierce. So is Holland Pierce someone who's just an interesting project? Are you surprised they're starting off at guard at 6'8"? And do you literally, I shouldn't say literally, do you view him in that same tier as Cameron Williams and Miles Hinton?
I do. Yeah. To me, like when I watched Holland Pierce, this was a guy, and when I saw him up close at the Shrine Bowl in January, like I thought that this was a guy that was draftable, and so for them to get him undrafted, I think that that's fine in terms of like, yeah, this is a guy that can come in and compete for a spot. My guess is it's probably more likely that he's practice squad than on the 53, but I wouldn't rule out his chances, and I think that it does not surprise me either that he has moved inside. We've seen them do it with Matt Pryor. We've seen them do it with Mekhi Becton. So that part does not surprise me. But yeah, I would give Pierce a fair shake here in that competition when you're looking at those tackles, the rookie tackles alongside him.
Last thing I want to talk about here is the coaching.
Yeah.
If you can give me 5 seconds, I want to show you and Julia and the audience
Okay.
something, a prop, if you will.
Okay.
So, right here in this box is an award that I need to present to Jeff Stoutland during training camp. And it's an award that Jeff Stoutland, look, I don't need to tell the audience. You saw the episode. You saw the best guest we've had in the history of the PHLY Eagle Show, Allison Stoutland. Jeff Stoutland's the winner. Yeah, the winner of the Dr. Z Award, and that Allison warned me about presenting this to him this summer. But the award aside, the reason he won this award is he's that good of a coach. You have been at just about every single practice of the Jeff Stoutland era, maybe outside the COVID year, right? No, the COVID year we were at training camp.
COVID year I was there, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so
training camp practice, anything that media as well.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Tell the audience what it's like watching a Jeff Stoutland practice.
I mean, he's awesome from the energy that he brings every single day, and obviously, like we know, like always teaching, very hands-on with all the guys, and it's the same stuff every day. And I've done a number of pieces with Coach Stoutland over the course of his career here in Philadelphia, and there were multiple times we talked about that exact sentiment of why he wants to do the same exact drills every single day, and why he wants to hammer home the details and make sure that everything is exactly the way it should look, because it's the classic like elephants on parade, like poetry in motion, like everything should look in lockstep, and so that is something that he is always hammering home, and it's really one of the core principles when it comes to his teaching methods, is really kind of being a master of the details in that way. So being there at practice, you definitely get that sense. He gets on guys, but he goes right up after, and he's helping them out and showing them, all right, like, this is the way I want it to look. So yeah, if you get the opportunity to do it, you go to the open practice at the link or whatever it is, it's always a lot of fun. Make sure you go down to that north end zone and take in the offensive line drills.
And then one thing I don't think you and I have discussed yet this summer is he's a new assistant, and it's an old assistant. Greg Austin and he's someone who you've seen him on the practice field before. He'll be, he returned. He's been in college for quite a few years. Any Greg Austin nuggets we should know going into training camp?
Yeah, I mean, he's been bouncing around college, as you mentioned. This is a guy that came in during the Chip Kelly era, so got here, to the around the same time, as Jeff Stoutland. Yeah, the same year as Jeff Stoutland did. He was with the Eagles from 2013 to 2015, and then was at UCF, Nebraska, FIU. Jumped on with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2023, and was there for the last 2 seasons. And now,
if I can interrupt real quick. You're going to have to hear the rest of the Greg Austin and some other stuff we were going to discuss in overtime.
Well done.
Yeah.
Excellent gusto. I think when you're looking at Greg Austin, again, the familiarity is there. This is a guy that's been around the NFL, been around college. I mean, I'm sure he'll hit the ground running, having, knowing exactly what to expect from Jeff Stoutland.
Look at that. You're not getting better offensive line preview anywhere than you are at PHLY Eagle Show having Fran Duffy. It's awesome. So look, we're going to round this up in overtime with, I got one other thing I want to discuss here.
Okay.
Trying to be transparent with the audience is that tomorrow, my son's going to the Saquon Barkley football camp, right? And so, you know, I'm taking him. And I don't know how to like not be a reporter, right? You know, but I'm not there on a reporting assignment. So it's like, you know, if I'm, typically the media, you go to a certain area to watch it. I mean, I'm just there as a father at this camp here. Is this going to be a challenge for me? Is it going to be like, am I gonna, like, I'm, am I gonna just be like, am I gonna try
is the Pope a Catholic? Yeah, it's gonna be a challenge for you.
Am I gonna try to jump the
fence? Is Zach gonna take his work hat off for 3 hours?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm there for my son, right? But like I can't, I mean, I'm just gonna be there in the parent section here. I'm not there to see Saquon, to talk to Saquon, but like, a few years ago, we're partners with Big Brothers Big Sisters here at PHLY, and I've talked about this in the past. I've been a big brother, and it's something I'm very proud of. And I took my little brother to the little Sean McCoy football camp one year, and like I was there in the big brother capacity, and like LaShawn just viewed me as like, he's like the beat reporter, so he's like, you need me? And I'm like, no, I appreciate that, but I'm here just taking Quasi, or just taking, I don't want his name names, just taking my little brother. And so so tomorrow, what's the best way for me to navigate this? Do I just like stand in a far corner? Do I mean, do I try to get that FaceTime with Saquon? Because they actually wrote in the email that like, unless you have the VIP package, which we don't have the VIP package, like parents do not get on the field, which I'm totally cool with. I'm in the stands watching it, but I also don't want to abdict my professional responsibilities. But I'm there tomorrow taking my son, not necessarily to try to get a few minutes with Saquon.
Yeah, my guess is that Saquon Barkley would be more impressed with you being in dad mode than you being in reporter mode tomorrow. That would be my guess, and that there would probably be even more respect on his end, where he sees you and you're not there for him, you're there for Reed. Yeah, that would be my take.
Well said. Yeah, no, I'm excited. I know Reed's excited for it. So tomorrow I will report back on tomorrow's show how that goes, how the Saquon Barkley camp goes, and what my son learned from that. And how about this? In connection to that, let's make tomorrow a running back episode.
Oh, let's do that. I love it.
Yeah. And Fran and I will text off there. Maybe we'll combine running backs and wide receivers if we or like running backs and tight ends maybe.
Tight ends,
right?
Maybe,
yeah. Running backs and tight ends. So tune in 2:00 tomorrow to find out the running back picture and the tight end picture in training camp this year. Find out how the Saquon Barkley camp went, and find out whatever else is on Fran Duffy's mind, the best draft analyst and Eagles analyst in the business. For Fran Duffy, Julia Hoff, who does an outstanding job every single day on the show, I'm Zach Berman. If Bo were here, he'd say, as always, we love you. I would say we'll do better tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
We all silly like the mayor.